Hey, if anyone can hear me. What?
Hmm?
Yeah, do they have Wi-Fi?
It's packed.
It's what?
It's packed.
But they could probably reach. So people can probably hear me right now. I don't know for how long, but here we are trying to get Jaime Tardy on, trying to get Jared on. As you can see, we're not in the most ideal location. I'm sitting here in the middle of the mall. I see some people chatting. Go ahead and give me the thumbs up if you can see me, hear me. We're trying to get Jaime on, trying to get Jared on, and we'll see how this goes. I'm getting lots of texts, lots of messages. So the story is Jared and I are sitting here at the West End Galleria, and we had the perfect spot in the middle of the lobby. I mean, we had a crowd gathered around us. Natalie Sisson was in the audience. Everyone was here to see this live broadcast of Pod Move Live. And about 30 seconds before we went live, everything just kind of shut down the internet on us. And let me tell Jaime to join us. So this is this is real. This is what Podcast Movement 2014 is. We're pulling this together. We're trying to do some cool, innovative things here with these chats. And I see Jaime in the chat room talking. Jaime, if you log out and log back in completely into the webinar jam, hopefully we can get you in that way. Jared is plugging in, trying to get connected. Kind of giving you guys a rundown of what's happening right now. Jared and I checked in. We took a tour of the area here. I see Jaime. Jaime, can you?
Yay! Can you hear me?
There's my friend Jaime. I hear her. Do you hear me? Okay.
I do. Are you like moved over to like Starbucks or something like that?
Yeah. So
Brookstone.
here I am in front of the Brookstone. We got the Starbucks over there. Jared, I think if the sushi place down there has benches, and you might be closer to the Wi-Fi. So we just sent Jared down to the sushi place to take the Macy's Wi-Fi. I've got a 4G connection for a little bit. The T-Mobile says I only get 100 megabytes or something like that a month, so we'll see how long this lasts. But Jaime, while we're here, let's make the most of it. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Good old tech problems. They were calling it the eventual webinar. It was really funny.
The eventual millionaire joins the eventual webinar, and I'm glad it was actually eventual and not a never. Just a heads up, guys, if anything goes wrong and it cuts off again, that's going to be it. So I don't want to beat around it anymore. Jaime, thanks for joining us. First of all, if there's anyone that's on the chat that's not familiar with you, maybe give the 30-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you do.
So I have a podcast. Who knew, right? Woohoo! That's why we're here. Hopefully you guys will see you in person very soon. I've been interviewing millionaires for apparently ever, comparatively to all you guys. It's been like 3.5 years, which is super, super old in the world of podcasting. But I have a site called Eventual Millionaire. I have a book that came out by the same title called The Eventual Millionaire, and I've interviewed over 150 millionaires in business that are self-made and figure out what they've done to be their secret sauce.
Very cool. Now, I want to jump right into it because, like I said, we don't know how limited our time is. I want to know how you feel because you've been interviewing millionaires, entrepreneurs for quite a while, and now this whole space of interviewing entrepreneurs is just so packed. I guarantee you we have some in the chat room tonight that do that exact thing. So how do you feel to see everyone kind of transitioning into the space that you were, kind of dominating at least for a little while?
I was first. No, I totally wasn't first. Mixer G. I remember watching Andrew Warner being like, "That was cool." Yeah, he's the great grandfather or something like that. No, it's hilarious because I get asked all the time on giving interview tips, which I think is awesome. But the funny thing is I get asked to be interviewed all the time. I have a wait list of I think like 60-something podcasts that I still need to be on because people want to have me like as one of the first people on their podcast, which I love, but I do not have enough time to do this. So I have a huge wait list, which is really makes me feel really cool. But yeah, it's insane. I think being able to interview somebody that you really admire is like the best way to be able to meet them. Like I would never in a million years be able to meet 150 millionaires. Right? I knew zero at first, and now my network is utterly insane, and a lot of them are really good friends of mine. And so without doing this interview technique, even if you only did it for meeting people, I highly recommend it. So everybody already knows that if they're doing interviews, they know how powerful it is, even if no one listens to your show ever. Hey, Jared.
There you go, and there's our friend Jared. Jared, say hello.
Or not.
Or not. We got frozen, Jared.
Can you hear me?
A little bit, buddy. Okay, so Jamie, let me ask you, because you mentioned Andrew Warner at Mixer G. What other interview shows did you kind of look to for inspiration when you were first getting started?
So Andrew was huge. I remember somebody on my mastermind group saying that there was a site called Mixer G. I was like, that sounds like a cooking show. But I started watching that one. That was really cool. And then David Siteman Garland from Rise to the Top, way back when. So I started watching him too. And Pat Flynn had a podcast way before me. So he was in my mastermind group. And Maren Kate Donovan, who used to have a blog called Escaping the 9 to 5, she was in my mastermind group too. And both of them had podcasts, and they were like ranking super well. And I'm like, I should do that too. And that's the reason why I started. So I used to listen to their podcast way a long time ago. They're saying it's a tennis match. Am I winning?
Well, so I'm trying to stop that a little bit for the viewer at home. But so I want to ask you, some of those ones you mentioned are podcasts that also do the video thing, and that's what you do. Is that, you're I guess looking up to Andrew at Mixer G? Is that one of the reasons why you decided to do the video along with the podcast?
No, actually, I didn't want to do video at first. One of the interviews that I did was with a millionaire, and he became a mentor of mine. And he goes, "Jamie, you're pretty. You have to do video." And I was like, I don't want to have to do makeup. I don't want to have to care about what shirt I'm wearing. I'm like, I don't want to look at my silly faces that I make all the time. I was like, video is not a good idea. And he really harped on me for a really long time, going, you need to do video. And I was like, all right, fine. And I started doing video, and it actually helped a lot with public speaking and a whole bunch of other things. I'm way more comfortable on camera than I ever, the very first one, I was staring at my little picture the entire time, going I look really dumb. But now, I highly recommend video, just because we might as well. We can always, and this is what I've said to lots of friends of mine who started video podcasts, you need to be able to go backwards, right? So if you ever wanted to get video from audio, you would have to create a keynote or a slide deck or something like that. Otherwise, you just get your face. It's really easy. You might as well be recording. Plus, I want to see what the millionaire offices look like. So in my opinion, I was like, hey, it's better to be able to converse and see people. One of the things I'm going to be mentioning on the keynote is I remember one of the very first podcasters I ever met. It was at New Media Expo. And I didn't know what she looked like at all, but I knew her voice, and she was behind me. And I was like, I know that voice. I didn't know which lady it was that was talking at all. I had no idea what she looked like. And I was sort of one of those creepy people going waiting for the lady behind me to talk. And then I was like, I love your podcast. Not what I expected she would look like at all either. So just having the video and stuff like that, I think makes a huge difference. So you can see, people make fun of my hand, I make hand gestures, and it's funny to see people's reactions to my faces that I make on video, but whatever. Video is worth it.
So I hope you guys are getting the ambient noises here of we're
crying babies. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and Jared's joined us. He's right across from me.
Hi, Jamie.
I love the fact that you're so versatile. Thank you.
Okay, we got little baby Jared here going. Yeah, this is interesting. This is interesting, guys. So Jamie, one thing I wanted to know, Jared and I were talking before we got started here, and we had a much clearer conversation than this whole thing going on right now. But one of the things that Jared and I mentioned was that we both had interview podcasts, and Jared still does his, and he felt like that was a great way to make connections. So we were talking okay, this is such a crowded space right now, doing these entrepreneurial interviews, but he says he's getting more benefit in terms of putting together the conference and already having these connections with the people that he wanted to. And that's your sound, JV, so
I know,
I'm not going to take credit for the motorcycle.
That's my fault. That was mine.
But Jared said one of the biggest things that he gets out of doing his podcast are those connections. So even if the podcast is kind of supplemental to those connections that he can do things with later on, is that kind of what you've experienced as well?
Definitely. I told my mentor, so I have a mentor back in Maine that taught me business coaching years and years ago. And I remember telling him, I was like, you need to start a podcast, not because you care about having an audience. That's great. But getting past gatekeepers and meeting the people that he really, really wants to meet within his community, huge. If you ask somebody to do an interview, they're like, oh, well then, yeah, I'll do an interview with you, right? Sure, come on over. Whereas if you're like, hey, I want to sell you something, course nobody's going to invite you over. So it's a great way to first meet people. It puts them up on a pedestal, makes them feel super cool. You can interview them. You have content if you really want to do anything. You might as well build an audience because heck, why not? But I mean, this is what I tell clients. This is what I tell my mentors that don't know podcasting, because everybody's coming to me now going like, okay, tell us what this whole podcasting thing. In Austin, I ended up meeting somebody who's going to be coming on my show who wants to start a podcasting consortium, and I'm going to help him run this podcasting consortium thing, because a lot of them don't really understand the power of podcasting. And so I was saying, even if you just do it just to get to know people, I mean, it's changed my life. Just the connections I've made, let alone all the people that are watching and listening, but just the connections alone have been huge. So I mean, you already know this, preaching to the choir, but it's insane, the people that you can meet.
Well, something I find interesting is that you now have the book and you're doing other things on the side in addition to the podcast. And that might be something that people are trying to connect the dots with in terms of, okay, I have this podcast where I interview a bunch of experts, but how do I then find a way to position myself also as an expert? How have you figured that out?
Now, the funny thing is I was a business coach way before I ever started interviewing millionaires. So I've been a business coach for offline for 2 or 3 years beforehand. So it's sort of interesting. I already had the expertise. But as I started my podcast, I was like, oh, well, I'm not a millionaire yet, so don't listen to me, listen to them. And what I ended up doing is pulling all the information, and now people call me like the millionaire girl or the millionaire expert. And you know what I mean? I've been on Yahoo's homepage 6 times since I've started my podcast, which is insane, about being the millionaire expert. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Crazy. So being this millionaire expert also has some weight to it, which is really, really cool. But yeah, it's one of those things where you really have to set yourself apart and really have the confidence in it. One of the things that was really cool is figuring out the book is being able to digest all the information. So if you're somebody who interviews experts, right, and technically they're the expert, you're not, but you can take all that information and be the aggregator of content. Even if you're just telling what the experts say, then you have pertinent information for people. You're an aggregator, which is extremely valuable in a land of way too much information overload right now.
Well, so, and you talked about the aggregating information that you're responsible for gathering, so then it's your material, even though it's aggregated, and you're really good at that. And in fact, you have a published book now. And Jared and I were talking again offline before we had all this great stuff set up to talk to you about. Jared, I guess, is off trying to find somewhere else to connect. He's no longer
Poor guy.
Yeah, but so we were talking about the book. So what was the process like to actually get that book deal going? Was this something that you had been trying for a while, and it took a lot of steps, or was it something that you got lined up right away when you tried?
Yeah, so when I was younger, I wanted to do a book, but I got a C in writing, and I was like, that's why I podcast, right? I am not a writer. I'm a podcast. I like to talk. That's about it. So me, like, coming up with a book, I was like, as long as I have a really good editor or someone to help me, then I'll be okay. The funny thing is, earlier that year, so this was probably 2 years ago, so my podcast and blog weren't even that big. It's grown a lot in the past 2 years. But I sort of wrote a goal, I want to write a book. Even though technically it was kind of distraction for what I was doing, but I really wanted a book. So I wrote it down at the beginning of the year and didn't really think about it. A couple months later, I got contacted by a literary agent. And I was like, oh, interesting. The reason why they contacted me is because I had a lot of press. And one of the things that literary agents are looking for is to make sure that you're good with the press, so that way later if you do end up getting a lot of press, they'll actually accept you. Because if you're not good on camera and stuff like that, they don't want to touch you with a 10-foot pole, by the way. So that was one of the big pieces. And I already had an audience. And, of course, publishers nowadays really care about if you already have an audience or not. So he ended up contacting me, but I was one of those people who I'm like, well, I don't want people coming to me. I want to get the best person, not just some random person coming to me. Not that he wasn't good. He had one of the biggest business books around, which is, it's like a business textbook that's huge. And so I was like, okay, so there's him. And then I ended up chatting with Chris Brogan's agent for a while, and they wanted me too. So I tried to find a couple other literary agents that, you know, could buy for me so I could feel cool and have a bunch of people want me. And then I ended up picking one. I ended up picking the original guy. He was actually really, really great. I talked to Chris about his agent and wanted to find out if he was pretty good. In general, I ended up picking the guy that I went with before. And it was really crazy. Like, it's sort of, number one, it's huge process, and the whole book proposal process is a huge pain in the butt. So now I just had Tucker Max on my show, and we were talking, self-published versus traditional published. It really depends on what you want to do. I'm really glad I went traditional published at first, but there are so many things that I can't do, like Amazon tweaks and all the stuff that I can't do. I can't even get like copies of my book. I can't give certain parts away for free. Like, it's a huge pain in the butt. But I'm really happy I have that, because it really set myself apart comparatively to everyone else that has, everybody can do a self-published book now. When I was able, I remember the first week it launched, I was in New York City recording videos for Yahoo, and my assistant and I walked to Fifth Avenue, Barnes & Noble, and my book was right there next to Eric Ries's Lean Startup and Chris Gillibaugh's book, and I'm just like, that was so awesome. And last week I randomly went to a Barnes & Noble and my book was right there too. So it's really distribution-wise, super cool. And I'm from Maine. I'm in Austin now, but I'm from a town of 2,000 people in Maine. There's no way that without the internet and podcasting in general, I ever would have been able to get a book deal. Not that I'm not cool on by myself, but yeah, no, there's no way.
Okay, but you kind of talked about that difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing, and how, maybe you can make more money self-publishing, but also it's cool to be, traditionally published, because that's kind of what a lot of people are aiming for. Because like you said, anyone can be self-published. Now there's different levels of it, but going forward, future books, what direction are you thinking?
Self-publish. I'm going to self-publish. So I know people that can get distribution now that I've proved myself on the traditional publish. I think the contract I signed, I have to give them first right of refusal, which is really annoying. So they wanted to do 3 books. I don't know how that's going to hash out long term, but we'll find out. And so, but I would go self-published from now on. But my main goal at the very beginning was speaking gigs, higher price speaking gigs, more of that. Now it's changed up a little bit. I'm not necessarily going for more speaking gigs, so going with a publisher didn't matter as much now as it did before. But it depends on what your goals are. If your goals are to make money, yeah, no, self-publish. Don't get me wrong, I got a pretty good advance. I'm a good negotiator. I got more than everybody else I knew. Still, not that much money.
So if I'm sitting here as somebody that some people in the chat room haven't started their podcast yet, haven't built a platform yet, but they want to maybe go that direction of publishing. You said you're not going to get traditional publishing because, if you don't have a platform, you don't have a presence in social media and real media, all of that. But you also said, that might be something that needs to be done before you can actually get self-publishing distribution. So it's like a chicken and the egg. What would you recommend for someone in that position?
Community first. Build your stuff first. Don't get me wrong, it's not like you can't write a self-published book, and I know people that have self-published and then publishers have picked them up, so don't get me wrong. But either way, you need an audience, right? You need somebody to sell your stuff to. So being able to create that community, whether you want to go one way or the other. I had built up the community for a very long time, almost 2 years, before I ever went to decide to do publishing. Then I knew people in the industry, and I could ask them, do I do self-publishing or do I not? And at that point, I could choose either way. I had an audience. I could self-publish if I wanted to and just sell it to them. Or I had an audience and knew a bunch of friends, because that's the one thing, too, is in my book, all my friends that said they would help me. And so I could show the reach that I had, which is why a publisher actually wanted it. Because I think I had 10,000 subscribers or something like that back then. And so being able to go okay, I have 10,000 subscribers, but to them they're like, we want to be selling 5,000 plus books. So 10,000, you're not going to sell 50% of your list for your book. So right. Then they're like, okay, well, who else can we do? So I listed, I rounded up all my friends. Hey, please, if I have a book, will you promote it? And so I got lists of names to help out, which was great, because after 2 years of book proposal and all that fun stuff, I had a lot of really amazing people that were willing to support it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's kind of like you took that online strategy of getting JV partners and things like that to promote your book, but did it with a product that at least, a portion of it was offline. It's like you brought that some of your area of expertise and experience and put it into a world that maybe it's not used so often.
Definitely, yeah. I see questions too. Stephen King is from Maine and does pretty good. Yeah, no kidding. No offense, I'm not Stephen King. I love Stephen King, but I'm not Stephen King.
So here's unfortunately what I'm going to do, because here I am in my computer saying I have 20% of my T-Mobile 4G left on my computer. So I see a lot of questions. Instead of getting to those questions now, I'm going to say a lot of you guys in the chat room I know are going to be there this weekend. Hunt Jamie down. If you have to, pull out some kind of weapon to keep her in one space, don't do that. She's pretty nice. Just talk to her.
No, I know karate, so try. I dare you.
There you go. So be careful. Tread lightly. So the questions, bring them to the bring them to the conference. Jamie, I'm gonna ask you one last question if we have time. But I do want to first get out here and say if any of the people have questions, they're not going to be at the conference. What's the best way to get a hold of you? Twitter? Can they shoot you a quick Twitter question? I know you said you're crazy busy.
Yeah, I'm always insanely busy. No, you can't give me admin rights so I can stay and chat with them, right? If you die.
You should be able to stay in the room, correct? I don't know if I don't know what it'll look like, but yeah, guys, Jamie's gonna stay here. But Jamie, I want to ask the question that we always ask, usually about 20 minutes later, but I'll ask it now. Can you give us a little preview about what we can expect from you on stage this Sunday?
Ooh, okay. So I told Dan and Jared that the only way I would do it is to name my speech called and so I went through and talked to like the heads of Podcast One and SoundCloud and a whole bunch of really cool places and asked them where we're going to be in 20 years and like what they see coming up. And so we went through a whole bunch of really, really cool stuff. Like, are we going to call it podcasting in 10, 20 years, or are we not going to call it? And I got a bunch of I boiled it all down, so I've got some good numbers and stuff like that to talk to you guys about.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And when we first started talking about bringing you on as a keynote speaker, you told me that was kind of going to be your focus and actually getting some real stats and real numbers. And I think that's pretty cool. And it's funny that the one thing you brought up just now is that podcast versus not calling a podcast. And I have that argument with a lot of people, and I don't really know where I stand. I think that's why it'll be so interesting to me because I don't know what the right.
The real deal. I'll tell you exact. Me and Cliff Ravenscraft had a little fight over it, so I wish I could have. We'll duke it out maybe right there. That'd be great.
There you go. And so guys, let's see. I'm happy to see. We'll get some questions in the chat room. So one, Daniel asked a while back, "Are you an eventual millionaire yet?" Or I mean, I guess you are an eventual millionaire, but.
See, that's what everybody says. They're like, I'm almost an eventual millionaire. I'm like, no, you are an eventual millionaire. So my definition, by the way, of an eventual millionaire is someone who has the goal to be a millionaire eventually, but they want to do it on their own terms. So they want to have an enjoyable life and an enjoyable business. So that's me, right? I love my life every single day, and it doesn't matter how long it takes me to get to the million. Like, because to me, it's more important to enjoy your life. So I totally enjoy my life, and I'm definitely building my net worth. I just say it's a couple $100,000 at the point right now, so I don't talk about how high my net worth is. But I also reinvest a lot into the business, so technically I don't include the business on that. Now the interesting thing is when I interview millionaires, I ask them to have a net worth of at least $1 million, but that includes the sale of their business. So you'll see people, just so you know, when they have to have a net worth. So I don't want people to have just $1 million business. To me, that doesn't mean anything because they could have a net profit of like nothing. And so we need to make sure they have good profits. Anyway, that's my little spiel.
All right. Well, let me ask you about this. When until I die, I'm going to keep talking over here. How do you feel about the income reports? Do you put out income reports? We see people doing this. We see people making astronomical numbers. Then, of course, there's always somebody that's saying, oh, these numbers aren't true. And then, there's all that. What's your personal feeling on that whole thing?
All my friends do income reports. And you know what's hilarious? When my blog was first new, I was doing income reports. I did income reports for probably like 6 months. I had some really creepy people coming out, like talking to me afterwards, and it freaked me out, and then I stopped doing them. So, it's funny because there was a lot of debate on that, and it's really interesting because Pat has always done them, and I've known him the whole time. Even when I was doing income reports, I knew Pat, and I was like, did you get weird stuff? And he was like, well, maybe it's because I'm a girl. I don't know, but I stopped doing them a long time ago. So no, I don't really care about doing them right now. I might do like a net worth report or something like that, or show, even if I don't show numbers, show the progress that I'm making. That might be something cool. I just haven't had a chance to do that yet.
Okay, so a couple different ideas there. Now, somebody else in the chat room, and I think this was a ghost person. Jamie, you probably don't know, but every once in a while we have some ghosts show up in the chat room and their names.
He died. Aw, poor Dan. Don't die, please, Dan. Aw, somebody loves me. Can you guys even see me? Can you hear and see me? Because now all I hear is loud noise from Dan. Oh. Oh, good. You guys can still, you can ask questions. Good. All right. So I'm randomly typing to you guys until I die. I know. Poor Dan. All right. So, well, let me scroll back up and see if there's other questions that I can answer for you guys. Oh, there's a whole bunch. All right. But yes, definitely, like, stop me. So I've been getting tons of emails from people saying, I can't wait to meet you in person. I'm like, if you see me, stop me, because we might not actually be able to meet later. So make sure you stop me whenever I need to. All right, I can't read half of these things. Okay. Yes, you should totally launch your podcast, Philip. Do it. Aw. You guys can hear me, but you can't see me? All right, well, I'll still stay here. I know, Dan's in the frame. Make me... There. Is that better? Can you guys see me now? No? Aw. You guys want to see me, not Dan? What? All right. Either way, if you guys can hear me, God rest his soul. You guys are awesome. All right, let me scroll back up. It's not really working very well. Walk through the process of how my podcast audience grew over time, for example, audience growth and stuff like that. Okay. So at the very beginning, way back when New and Noteworthy was very different, there wasn't like 2 different screens. It was there wasn't a lot of podcasts out there. So as soon as I launched, the very first month, I was getting thousands of downloads a day, over 1,000 downloads a day, and I only had 1 episode. And so it started to go a little bit crazy then. So that definitely helped. And then I started doing a weekly podcast. So that was quite a bit. Good, people can see me. It's dark here now though, and I didn't set up any lights, so I look a little undead. But good. So once I started building things up, it's audience building 101 in general. Whether you have a podcast, you're a content marketer, right? So in general, as a content marketer, you need to start getting more eyeballs, whether it be doing more podcast interviews. I did a lot of podcast interviews because I wanted to get more subscribers, and the best way that I know of to get more subscribers is to go on big name podcasts and ask for people to subscribe to your podcast too. So there's definitely that. There's going and guest posting. There's doing list swaps and trying to get more people coming over to your list that way. But like I said, it's audience building 101, 102, 103, 104. So it's just a process of trying to get that going. When did I feel ready to launch? Ooh, so way back when, I didn't know anything about like the tech side of podcasting or anything. I ended up asking a millionaire to do the interview before I even had like my mic or anything set up at all. But I wanted to set up a time on when. Is that working? We still good? So I never really felt ready, especially because that very first interview that I did was horrible, and I thought it was really, really bad. I made like the worst. So the first person I ever interviewed was a millionaire, which is dumb. So if anybody hasn't launched their podcast yet, do not do your very first interview live with the person that really, really matters. Now I help people start interview shows and stuff like that, and they practice on me, which is totally fine. John Dumas, you guys probably know him. I was his very first interview. I got to critique him and let him know whether or not he was good or not, which he thought he was horrible, so he didn't even put that out. He never actually put that one out. So don't. Good. Some people can see me. Some people can't. Oh well, you can hear me. I'll still answer questions. So trying to go and do your first interview with somebody and then realizing that you would hugely waste their time if you don't launch with that is bad. So I launched with one, and then 2 weeks later another one came out. And then I didn't know how many millionaires I was going to be able to get. I didn't know like posting schedule mattered and you should be doing like at least a weekly show or anything like that. Mine was random because I didn't think I was going to be able to get anybody to say yes. I didn't know any millionaires like at all, like zero. I remember asking my mentor and going, hey, do you know any millionaires that I could interview? And he's like, not that anyone's going to come and say, yeah, I'm a millionaire. So like me trying to find that stuff was really, really hard at first too. So I ended up finding some. Oh yeah, everyone loves John Dumas. Me and him went to high school together too, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. But yeah, we went to high school together. He was cool and I was so not cool. Do I think there's still a space for new podcasters to interview business owners? If you do it the right way. So there are 1,000 lookalike shows, right? And the interesting thing is there's a lot of bigger players coming to the space, right? So interviewing the guy from Podcast One and seeing what they're doing is insane. They have huge names. They have Jillian Michaels. They have huge names that are coming that we're trying to compete with. So we're sort of the little guy. So what you have to do is either pick a smaller niche, right? So maybe you're interviewing, a specific type of business owner, right? Mine is pretty broad. I still have a niche. Mine's millionaires. I mean, I think way back when I should have actually niched a little bit more, right? But now it's more about getting the super, super niched show. I mean, not super niched, don't get me wrong. Like, we don't want to be like flower pot painting or something like that. Like, not too niched, but enough so that when somebody, your avatar, whoever is somebody that really, really resonates with it, goes, that's for me, and I'm going to get a lot out of it. That's what you care about, okay? So, ooh, there's a whole bunch of stuff now. So do I try and limit the length of the interview? What I used to do is I was super excited to have a millionaire on the line, so I would talk to them as long as humanly possible. I'd be like, woohoo, you're probably worth like a lot of money an hour. Let me, as humanly possible. They would end up being like an hour. Now I definitely try and limit it, and just so you guys know too what my process is on the back end, I actually end up doing 2 interviews with them. One for my membership site. Right? Aw, John Lee Dumas loves you. He talks about me. I definitely still mentor people for sure. Actually, I think 7 of my clients, either previous clients or current clients, are going to go to the podcast movement. So some of them I've never even met in person. Anyway, so that was a side note. But so I record 2 separate interviews. The first one I usually keep about 30 minutes, which is the one that goes public and live on my podcast. And then I have a membership site, and I'll do quick 15 minutes, super action-packed, and we create action guides that go along with that in the mastermind, in the membership site. And so the millionaire usually is totally cool with it, by the way, in case anyone wants to know. And so I asked him to do 2 different interviews. So it's actually shortened the length, but I'm getting 2 different pieces of content from 1 interview. Yes, there's a Jamie in the chat and a Jamie as a guest. I love your name, Jamie, by the way, even though you spell your